My name is Barry Tumbler, and I'm a volunteer at Emmanuel Church. Make a difference? No, I never even thought about that. Actually, probably the first time I ever thought about making a difference was after I came here and I had retired, and in 2013, I decided I wanted something to do, so I started doing volunteer work here. And lo and behold, happened to meet up with Dan Ketz, and I'd let him tell you the story because he says it funnier than me. But we developed a teamwork relationship, and we've been doing volunteer work ever since. As far as feeling defeated, I would have to tell you that word is not in my vocabulary. Anyone who truly knows me, that if you put an obstacle in my path, you will find out that I'll either go around it, over it, under it, or through it. But I will get done whatever it is I set my mind to do. So defeated is not in my vocabulary.
That dude and his buddy Dan are my heroes. I get to spend a lot of time with them every week, bumping into them around the building, and I can promise you something. You will learn more from them in 5 minutes in the way that they follow in Jesus' footsteps than you will from me in 35 minutes on a Sunday morning. They are really incredible people, and Barry stands as an example of what we've been talking about for the last 3 weeks. And as we get ready to wrap up this series that we've called The Reason for You, Barry gives us one kind of final glimpse of what someone who understands that reason looks like, how they function and how they live out their everyday. Because the truth is, Jesus calls all of us to live that way. All of us to live with that kind of assurance. All of us to live with that kind of direction and focus. And somehow, some way, at the same time, with that same level of humility. Only God can do something like that in the life of a human being and use them in such a profound way. So I want to wrap up our discussion today by starting with a question to see what you know about catastrophes. What do you call something that costs 300 people their lives, destroys 2,000 acres of property, and leaves 100,000 people homeless? You call it a conflagration. Surprised you didn't know that. But a conflagration is the technical term for a fire that threatens human life, animal life, and property. And in October of 1871, Chicago had a great conflagration. And most of the city was destroyed. In fact, $222 million worth of damages. 1/3 of the city's valuation at the time was destroyed in that fire. And one of the things that we learned from such a major event like that was it started with a very small thing. Rumor is all you need to start a conflagration like that is a lantern and Mrs. O'Leary's cow. We haven't proven that for sure that's where all of it began, but the idea is interesting, isn't it? One small spark can do all of that damage, can have that profound of an effect. And so as the assessors came into the city and they started walking around looking at the smoldering rubble all around, they determined that 17,500 buildings were destroyed in that fire. But as they make their way through and get to the heart of the city, they find one still standing. The water tower on Pine Street, what we know as Michigan Avenue. The great Chicago water tower was not the only building that survived the Chicago fire, but it became the most important. It became the symbol of hope, the symbol of determination to rebuild. Now, I don't know if the man who designed it and helped build it, a man named William Boyington, ever thought for 1 second that this fairy tale looking building that was only built to cover a pipe that brings water in from Lake Michigan would ever become so iconic, would ever become so important. I don't think that he for 1 minute thought that he would make a difference that would echo for more than 100 years in a city. That something that he made would become this, again, a symbol for the toughness of a whole group of people. What a profound idea. What set his building apart, why his building was left standing, was because he decided to build it out of what was considered at the time a different substance. He used yellow limestone to build the water tower. When most other buildings were built out of wood, he said, I'm going to build it out of stone, because he was of the generation that thought, if I'm going to build something, I'm going to build it right. And I'm going to build it in such a way that it will last for years. Not thinking about a fire, but just the test of time. I want what I put my hands to have longevity. You see, what things are made of is important, isn't it? What things are made of matters, because if they have longevity, if they last beyond just the moment, what happens over time is that thing creates its own gravity. That longevity helps gravity come into existence with that thing. And so this becomes important for a building that we build. This becomes important for a job that we do. This becomes important for the character we're trying to create in ourselves. We want to be building our lives out of things that have longevity, because then they actually will matter. This whole month we've been talking about this thing inside of us, this piece of our DNA that is starving to make a difference with our days. To get to the end of our life and look back and say, the world is better because I lived here. My family is better, my neighborhood is better, my office is better, my PTA is better because I was a part of it. I want to know that I made an impact. I want to know that I had an effect. And what I'm learning more and more is that what we decide to build our life out of, the substance we use, is what will determine whether or not that happens. It's not just the fact that we're uniquely wired. It's not just the fact that we have a purpose in life. It's the moment by moment decisions that we make along the way where we're putting our life together. Those are the things that matter the most. How we apply our unique gifting, how we apply our unique personality and character matters. What I'm coming to realize is that mortal significance is made of eternal substance. Mortal significance, the idea that my life is significant, can only be the result of building that life out of things that are eternal, that last forever, that will not pass away when I pass away, that will not fall apart when my life comes to an end. Because isn't that the real test of whether or not our life made a difference? Is that when it's over, when it's said and done, whether that's we pass away or we retire or our kids move out of the house or whatever, when we come to the end of that chapter and we look back on it, isn't the test of whether or not it mattered and made a difference, isn't the test that it goes beyond that moment? Immortal significance is made of eternal substance. Now, the scriptures point to this idea over and over and over again. The idea of putting pieces together day in and day out that aren't just about the day, that they keep the grand scheme in mind, that they keep the long run in view as we put our lives together, which is so hard in our day and age. Let's be real with each other. We are in what's called a microwave society. It's all about right now, in the moment, whatever we're feeling now. We don't think about tomorrow. And in some ways, we look at what Jesus said about don't worry about tomorrow. Today has enough worries in of itself, and so be present in the moment. Like, that's really, really good, but sometimes we aren't thinking enough about what's next so that the next tomorrow or the next today can be of significance. So I want to look at a passage from a letter that Paul wrote. Paul wrote a lot of letters, and it helps make up a good chunk of our Bible. And it's in 1 Corinthians. If you want to follow along in your own Bible, we're going to start in chapter 3. And this is a passage that I think, if you don't move slowly through it, is one, easy to miss, and two, easy to misunderstand. So I want to move kind of slowly through it. We're going to start in chapter 3, verse 10. This is what Paul says. Because of God's grace to me, I have laid the foundation like an expert builder. Now others are building on it. He says, but whoever is building on this foundation must be very careful, for no one can lay any foundation other than the one we already have, Jesus Christ. Paul starts with this idea of a foundation. And if you think about this, a foundation is the right place to start, because everything else is literally based on it. Think about that. Everything in your life literally depends on the foundation that you're building that life on. The foundation of a structure holds the weight of everything above it. The foundation is the source of strength for everything above it that keeps it upright, that keeps it standing no matter what kind of storm comes along, no matter what kind of fire might blow through. The building stands because of the foundation, and not only the shape of the foundation, but the substance of that foundation. And for Paul, he says, the foundation in the Christian faith, the foundation for your life that will last and echo into eternity, that foundation is Jesus Christ. He says that as you go about building your life, nothing should be outside Jesus. Don't add to him. Don't try and get around him. He's enough. He's enough to base your entire life on. You don't need anything else. It's really that simple. Now, Paul never professed to be an architect. He was a great theologian, he was a great preacher and teacher, and he was all of these things, but there's no place in the Bible where Paul says, and I am an expert architect. But somehow, some way, he understood a few things about what it takes to build a building. The next time you go to downtown Chicago, or you go to Milwaukee, or one of the other great cities that we have relatively close by, I want you to notice something about every skyscraper in the city. Every skyscraper is always smaller at the top than it is at the bottom. All of them. I'm not an architect either, but this is what I've noticed. And I think I've been able to deduce why that is. Because if the building were larger up at the top than it were at the bottom, what would happen? It would be a little wobbly, and you would never catch me up at the top floor. But it wouldn't be stable. If the top gets wider than the bottom, you have shaky ground. It always has to be smaller. The base has to be larger, or at the very least, you have to be at the same size. You cannot go outside the perimeter of the base. And what Paul says is, listen, as you're building your life, do not build outside the perimeter of Jesus, because you will live a life on shaky, unstable, uncertain ground. That he is not only the foundation substance-wise, he's the foundation shape-wise, and all of a sudden we find ourselves all the way back at week 1 of the reason for you. And we said the reason we exist is to know Jesus and grow to be like him. That's why we're here. Isn't it interesting? Think about this. Foundation, know Jesus. Understand the perimeter in which we've been given to build our lives, and then grow to be like him. Build your life in the same shape, within the same perimeter that Jesus exists. That is the reason for you. You grow to be like Jesus, but make sure you get the foundation right. You live this principle out if you've ever played the game Jenga. Do you remember Jenga? This is one of my favorite games. It's also not good if you have high blood pressure. Because it's very stressful. But there's an unwritten but always agreed upon rule when you're playing the game of Jenga. No one is to go to the bottom row and take the outside blocks out. Right? Everybody understands that. You don't mess with the bottom row. Just leave the bottom row good so that we can actually play this game for a little while. Because what happens if you take the outside 2 blocks out? You just have 1 block, and the whole tower is on this one thing. And that's no fun. That's not freedom. That's not joy. That's stress and worry. Constantly thinking everything is going to fall apart. Which is precisely where a lot of us live our lives. Worried that at any moment, everything is going to fall apart. And it's not because the world is messing with us, it's just because we haven't based our life on something sturdy, on something eternal, on something that will last beyond whatever storm might blow through our life. You see, reality for you and I, if we want to ever be that thing that's still standing and stands the test of time and actually makes a difference in someone's life, if we want mortal significance, we have to make our life out of eternal substance. It can't be the things that in the moment make us happy. It can't be the things, and I'm not saying that all of those are innately bad. I'm just saying if those become the things that we build our life on, we're going to have a really difficult time feeling like we matter, feeling like we have meaning. We will be miles away from a sense of influence like we talked about last week. We're not experiencing love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. Those are not a part of us. We're just trying to keep everything upright because we're building our life out of mortal kinds of things. That's the substance that we look for. But where we need to start, where we need to begin, is with Jesus. And then Paul goes on in verse 12 to say this: anyone who builds on that foundation may use a variety of materials: gold, silver, jewels, wood, hay, or straw. Isn't this interesting that at first, I kind of read that and go, well, Paul's talking about all our unique wiring. We can build a life out of whatever, but the truth is, he's drawing a distinction between materials. There's really two categories. If you look at these kind of 6 things that he lists, there's 2 primary categories. The first one is the gold, silver, and jewels. These are things of value. And these are things that will last forever. I have a good friend that has a collection of gold, and I always wonder, what is the gold for? And he always says to me, it will last forever. It will always be of value. Right? So the idea here that Paul gives us is that you have the opportunity to build your life, build your understanding of who you are and what it's all about out of things that will actually last, out of things that have real value, that provide longevity and bring gravity to your life. Or you can choose category number 2, which is wood, hay, or straw. You can take a page out of the 3 Little Pigs. And you can build your house out of these things, and when the big bad wolf comes, he will blow your house down. That's what Paul says. He essentially says you have 2 decisions to make in life. You have to decide, number 1, what will you build your life on? What's your foundation going to be? And then second, what will you build your life with? What materials are you going to choose? And again, a lot of us choose materials like a bigger commission, or the next sexual encounter, or the next Instagram blow up where we get 150 likes or whatever it might be because we've presented a beautiful life that everybody appreciates. Some of us, it's the next vacation. Some of us, it's the next great party. We think that those are the building blocks of a life of significance, that those are the building blocks of a life of joy. And Paul says, listen, you might be choosing the wrong category because it might be exciting today, but tomorrow, when everything hits the fan, it's not going to be stable. It's not going to be sustainable. It's not going to have longevity. And you will find yourself wondering, why do I not feel like there's meaning in my life? It's because you started looking at the immediate instead of the eternal. Mortal significance is made of eternal substance. Your life mattering, you making an impact in whatever context you are. I'm not saying that you have to become a preacher. I'm not saying that you have to work at a church. I'm not saying that you have to quit your job and go to a country on the other side of the planet. I'm saying in your world, your family, your marriage, your team at work, your children, if you want to make an impact there, you have to infuse those relationships. You have to infuse those contexts with things of eternity. Because that's what will make it. That's what will be there at the end. This other stuff, I promise you, will come and go. I fall into this trap all the time. I'm an Apple junkie, like Apple, iPhone, iPad, computer stuff, and I fall for it every time. They tell me that their newest product is going to revolutionize my life, and I believe them, and I throw money at them. And you know what they say the next time they get on the platform to roll out a new product? This one will really revolutionize your life. And I fall for it again. And what I'm learning is that the phone in your pocket lasts about 9 months, and then it's out of date. But we think we've got to have it, right? We think that that's going to make a difference in our life. And what you learn is that these things, they're just temporal. They're just momentary. And we get to that 9th month, and we go, man, my life is so hollow. At least maybe that's just me. But there's nothing to this. There's no real substance to my life. I've got the nice car. I've got the big house. I went on the nice vacation. I've got the latest gadget. I've got the pretty girlfriend. I've got all of these things. But we have this sense of something missing. And it's because we built all of those things out of things that will not go past tomorrow. We have to choose better material. We have to choose better substance. Paul continues on in verse 13 with this idea. He says, but on the judgment day, fire will reveal what kind of work each builder has done. The fire will show if a person's work has any value. If the work survives, that builder will receive a reward, but if the work is burned up, the builder will suffer great loss. The builder will be saved, but like someone barely escaping through a wall of flames. The word picture that Paul is playing with here sounds an awful like 1871 in Chicago. A fire sweeps through our life, our city, and what happens, just like it did back then, is that flame begins to reveal our craftsmanship. The flame begins to test the material that we have built our life out of. Now, before any of you get really uneasy in your chair and think about it might be time for a bathroom break or get a cup of coffee because this is about to go hellfire and brimstone, that's not what Paul's talking about. This is not a conversation about the saved and the lost, and that the lost will burn in hell. That's not what he's talking about here. Notice, the builder will be saved, but they will suffer great loss because their building burned up in the fire. This is about Christians. This is about the life that you and I are constructing every day, and whether or not it means anything, whether or not it's going to make any difference, whether or not it will echo on into eternity or die with us. That's what this is about. That God will test us. He will test our wisdom in the things we chose to build this life out of. And so I, for one, would love to come out on the other side of that with a life that's still standing, because it's built out of things that are fireproof. I want my marriage to be built out of things that are fireproof. I want my church to be built out of things that are fireproof. I want my doctrine to be built out of things that are fireproof. I want my job and my effort and my character to be built out of things that are fireproof. Not because I'm worried I'm going to go to hell, but because I want my life to matter. I want my life to have made a difference. I want somebody to miss me when I'm gone. And you can't listen to any of what Paul's writing here without thinking about one of Jesus' most famous stories. Jesus was a master teacher. He did so much with story. And he talked about these two guys, a wise man and a foolish man. You remember them? The wise man built his house on rock. The foolish man built his house on sand. You can read about this in Matthew chapter 7. But instead of a fire sweeping through, what sweeps through? A great storm. And the one that built his house on a sturdy foundation and constructed it out of wind and rain and storm-proof kinds of materials, it was still standing at the end. Jesus, by the way, goes on to make the argument that those sturdy materials that are stormproof are his teachings, but that foolish man lost everything. What's interesting is Jesus doesn't say the foolish man died in the storm. He just lost his house. All that work, all that effort, all that planning, all that energy passed. What we learn is that mortal significance, our lives, mattering, is made of eternal substance. This is why I think Jesus said these words in Matthew chapter 6, verse 19. Don't store up treasures here on earth, where moths eat them and rust destroys them, and where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy, and thieves do not break in and steal. He says, build your life out of eternal substance. Build your life out of things that will last forever. We joke all the time, I want to live forever. You can. You can live on into eternity with real significance. But the key is build your everyday, your character, your relationships, your everything out of the things that will be there. That's how we know if anything was of value. That's where we started this conversation, that it will be there in the long run. And so I want to give you a strategy today that I think might help you determine, because here's what I always struggle with. I have a decision to make. I have an event to go to, I have a whatever, and I'm trying to determine, is this eternal substance? Is this going to matter in the long run? And my strategy has become very simple, and I'd love to share it with you. It's one question. Will this matter? Will this matter in 1 year? Will this matter in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years? This becomes very helpful in an argument, by the way. Whether it's with your spouse or a neighbor or whoever, if your neighbor's dog makes a mess in your yard, is that really going to matter in a year? Be honest. It might change how you interact with that neighbor. How the toothpaste gets squeezed, is that really going to matter in 3 years? Is that vacation going to matter in 10 years? Is the promotion that you are killing yourself and killing your family for, is that going to matter in 10 years? This is the litmus test for me. And to take it a step further, the scriptures give us a pretty central, simple idea for how to determine whether the answer is yes or no. This is what Paul said again in 1 Corinthians. He says, 3 things will last forever: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is love. You want to know if it matters? Ask yourself, is it loving? Is what I'm about to say loving? Is what I'm about to do loving? Is this relationship defined by love? Is this context that I find myself in, is it being permeated with love because I'm in it? Because love will last forever. So you and I need to get better about finding those things and pursuing those things. And that might sound simple, and it might say like a reductionist idea, like you're just making it too easy. But this is what the Bible says over and over again. This is what Jesus said in John. If you go to John chapter 15, Jesus said, love each other in the same way I have loved you. There's no greater love than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Love each other. That's what you're here for. Eternity is found in sacrificially loving and serving other people. And this is how I know that. That's the shape of the foundation. That's who Jesus was. That's the model that he gives us. You see, Jesus used all of himself to love all of us. And so he calls us into a similar pattern, and I would say he calls you to use all of you to love all of them. That's the stuff of eternity. That's the stuff that matters. It's not your job. It's not your house. It's not your social media life. It's not any of those things. It's this. Because Jesus loving us has lasted more than 2,000 years. And right now, all over the world, hundreds of thousands, millions of people are gathered together in that name. And next week, millions of people will celebrate from their guts the fact that a tomb is empty and that it shows us that Jesus loves us. That's how Jesus made a difference. He loved unlovable people. He sacrificed for people who didn't deserve it. He stood in the gap for people who were full of despair and hopeless. He says, now you go do the same. That's why I put you here. That's the reason for you. That's what will last beyond you. Mortal significance is made of eternal substance. So the question that you and I have to grapple with this morning, every single one of us, is what is your life based on? What are you building your life out of? And if it all came crumbling down today, if a fire blew through your life or a storm blew through your life today, what would be left? I think I came here this morning to say one simple thing. I can promise you the only thing that will be left is the perimeter that we say we build our life on. Jesus. That in the end, that's what will be left standing. Loving God, loving others, full stop. And here's what's so scandalous about this, is that building your life on Jesus begins with one simple decision. Just say yes. And I'm going to start today. It's scandalous that Jesus would be on a cross dying. The thief next to him would say, remember me in paradise today when you enter in there, assuming he won't be with him. And Jesus says, no, today you'll be with me. That was it. That was all it took. And when he walks up to his disciples, he says, follow me. And they say, okay, here we go. It wasn't, hey, follow me, but first you need to say very specific things to get into the club. No, just start following me. Just start building a life differently than you've been building it to this point. Follow my example. Use me as the perimeter of your life. Don't go outside of it anymore. Does that mean you might have to knock down some walls that you've already constructed? Yeah, for sure, because they're going to be outside of that. But just start again. Build your life on him again. So for some of you here this morning, this is the day. This is the day where you're going, not only do I not like the house that I've built, that is my life, but I'm ready to tear that thing down and start new because I need something different. I need a difference to be made in my life. Today might be that day. So here's what we're going to do. Just so you have a minute to yourself, I'm just going to ask everybody to close their eyes and bow their heads, not because, again, that we're trying to be weird, but this is just, for a lot of us, we just need to feel like we can have a private moment with God. And here's all I'm going to ask you to do, because I want to pray for you. If you're here this morning and you're at a place where you're going, I have not built my life on Jesus, but today I want to do that. I'm ready to say, sorry for going the wrong direction, God. I'm going to knock this thing down. I'm going to start over with you so that my life can matter and have significance beyond my mortality. I'm going to ask that you just put a hand in the air so I can pray for you. I'm not going to point you out. I'm not going to make you do a little dance or anything like that. If you would raise your hand, thank you. I just want to pray for you. There's a few of you, thank you. Thank you. Let me pray for you, and then I've got a couple other things I want to share before we go. God, I don't always know how to pray for people who are so courageous and so aware of where they're at in life that they're willing to put a hand in the air and say, I need a new start. I need this Jesus in my life because I've come to the place where I understand that things are hollow, where things are lacking. And you give me not just life, but life to the fullest. And so, Lord, we ask that you would give that to them today, that you would forgive them, and that you would help them to understand what this life looks like going forward. That you would wash things clean. That you would help them to let go of the walls that they've already built, and help them to start building one brick at a time with eternal substances. In Jesus' name, amen. Here's what I want you to understand. We've had this discussion now for 4 weeks. And this is for all of you, Christian or not. Everything has a reason, including you. There are a lot of things that are confusing about God, and I'm not always sure of. But one of the few things I am sure of is that God doesn't do anything by accident, and nothing is really by chance. That he's that hyper-purposed. And for each of us in this room, we have meaning according to the one who made us. And so I mentioned an idea a couple weeks ago that I want to come back to just to make sure that you understand what's available to you. In 2 weeks from today, April 8th, we're launching a brand new environment called Jumpstart. And it is designed from bottom to top to help you discover who God is, who you are, and how you can work in the mission that he's called you to. Discovering your unique wiring, and then beginning to take steps and build life out of eternal kinds of things. And what's so cool is it's just 4 weeks. 4 weeks, 65 minutes each week, because it runs during this service and during the 11 o'clock service, both of them. And there's just one you. It's just you spending some time getting to know God better, getting to know yourself better. And those 4 weeks are pretty simple. First, we talk about essentials in that first week. These are the foundations of what we believe as Christians and what we believe as a church. And then in the second week, we talk about the church and kind of how the church is put together and really what its purpose is, because we don't think of our church as the walls that we're sitting between right now. We think of it as us, and we're doing something for God. And then the third week is purpose. Why am I here? What's God going to do with me? And we talk more about this meaning. We take a deep dive in that week. And then the final week is team. What does it look like to participate then, especially here at Emmanuel, but even beyond that, to actually begin living into this purpose that I've been called to and building my life up. So 2 weeks from today, Jumpstart. If you're interested in jumping in on that process, next on the 8th, we're actually starting with week 2. Because it's the second week of the month. So it's always, whatever week we're on, that's the week we're going to do in Jumpstart. You don't have to do it in order. You can just jump in and get all 4 done in whatever order you can. And it's going to be every single week, because we really believe in this idea. And we really want to help people grow to be like Jesus. And part of that is understanding who he's made us to be. So I want to personally invite you to jump into Jumpstart in 2 weeks and get moving on mission. There's more information for you at the Next Step Center this morning. Barry, he's where we started. That's where we got to finish. Because like I said, he's taught me more than any theology book I've ever read. And what he's done with his life in a way that most of us would never even know. And that's my favorite part about him. He hated that we asked him to do this. And his partner in crime said, no way. Because that's not what this is about. But I want you to hear the rest of Barry's story and how he's been building a life out of eternal substance.
From a kingdom perspective, I would have to tell you that it is a lot of joy. And it's not, I don't care about money, recognition, or anything like that. The fact is, I do everything I can to try to stay in the shadows. But the thing that I find most is that seeing the results and other people, how they perceive what I've done. And as examples, I'm working down there in the basement on the youth room. And the youth come down there and they take a look and they're like, wow, they can't believe what they see. And then they realize this is all for them. So it's kind of like a great joy you feel from that. When I go to Kenya, my Kenyan brother there, Blasto, he is so amazed by what I do. And he doesn't seem to, he'll say to me, I just don't know what words to say to you. And I said, simple. How long did you pray for help with your project? And God sent me. So what can I tell you to do? I say, thank God, not me. Give him all the praise because he's the one that made it happen. The way I used to think, I probably did it all for my own recognition. And I would say that after my first mission trip to Kenya in 2014, I came back with a totally different perspective. I try to do everything, when I work now, as I said, I try to do everything in the shadows because I go by two principles. And that is, if you look at Matthew 6 verses 1 through 4, so Jesus in his famous Sermon on the Mount is talking about giving. And what I say to him, to all of that, is that any good deeds that you do in secret. Because if you don't, then you're basically a hypocrite and a show-off. And besides that, your Heavenly Father sees what you do in secret, and he rewards you appropriately. And around here, it's kind of hard to do anything in secret. So I go by my second principle, and that principle is to 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 5. And in it says that anything you do, we do not have the right to claim anything that we do on our own, because it is God who provides everything you need to make it happen. So you give all praise to God. So as I say, I try to stay on the background.